to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
I'm medium Kelly White.
And we have John, our engineer, here today.
Hello, hello.
Hi, John.
Hi.
And we have a very special guest that we've had on the show before, but she's come for part 2, and it's Linda Gabriel, our show's hypnotist.
Welcome, Linda.
And Life Between Lives expert. So thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Thanks for asking me.
Oh, absolutely. We had to after that session.
Yeah.
So I think if anyone heard the show before, I said that I was going to have a session with Linda because, of course, I'll try anything.
Yes, you will.
Not when it comes to food. That's where I draw the line. But yeah, with this stuff, I just want to experience it and I want to see what it's all
Well,
about.
I want to hear all about it.
I got to tell you, it was life-changing. I mean, it was amazing.
Wow.
It was amazing. How do we start this, Linda?
Well,
Why don't you tell the listeners who maybe didn't hear the first show?
Right, about what Life Between Lives is.
Yeah, a little bit about what you do and what Life Between
Okay.
Life is and all that stuff.
So Life Between Lives hypnotherapy is about what happens after you die in a past life and continue on into the spirit world. It's very similar to what people report from near-death experiences, although it doesn't always take that form. What it is at the core thing I look for is a conversation with the person's guide so they can ask questions about their life today. And if there's a past life theme or trauma to work out, we can also get input from the guide. So it's a very interesting place to go. And as you know, we also look at what we're aware of in utero a few days before we were born from the perspective of our soul. It's not a rebirth or anything like that. And you
Right.
had a pretty interesting experience there. Do you want to talk about it?
Oh my God, that was so. I mean, first of all, I think I didn't know how hypnotizable I was because of my left brain, and it's not that I have to be in control, but I feel safer knowing what's going on, right? And I think control has bad rap. Has a bad rap to it. But I really felt, so I thought I was going to be a lot more alert. I knew I could get out of it any time, so I was alert in that way. But I kind of, and maybe because I had met you and I feel a real connection with you that I was able to, it felt really comfortable, plus your space is very comfortable. And I felt safe. And so I was able to let myself go, and it just felt like a heaviness. Like I didn't want to pull myself out, but I knew I could.
You could. And I think that's important for people who are listening to understand about hypnotherapy or hypnosis. It's not like you're taking a drug or that you're out of control. It's just a relaxed, focused state. And people often say, I felt like I could open my eyes at any time. I just didn't want to. And, if people have to use the restroom or something, I can count them up. They go, they come back, they go back into that relaxed state. And it's just, as I have told people, it's about getting the conscious mind to relax enough so that we can talk to the subconscious where all your data is stored. It's like the hard drive. We can, instead of just looking at the screen, I think of the conscious mind as the screen and what's on display, but then the subconscious is in charge of all your memories, including your past life and between life memories.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I'd never thought about it that
Yeah.
way. And I made a conscious choice to just focus on your voice. And you had said last time, I think it was you that said, hypnosis is just about being hyper-focused. Like when we're reading a book and we don't notice the noises around us.
A good movie will do that too. Yeah.
Right. So I made a conscious choice to just focus on your voice and just do that.
How long did that process take for you, do you think, to go into that hypnotic state?
It was almost right away. I mean, you did. I can't.
Well, I give everyone, including I gave Shirley a recording to listen to at home, and then I say a lot of the same use a lot of the same language. So she was primed, but I still take a long time for this work. I mean, there are ways you can put people under really quickly, but I think that violates that feeling of trust and control. So I enjoy doing a long, what we call an induction, where the person is just very gently relaxing And then I had you tell me about a home you lived in around the age of 12 and to describe that, which most people can remember. And
Right.
the act of remembering is also a slightly altered state. And then we go back to an early childhood. And then we just have some warm-up exercises and we really take our time. So it's about
Yeah.
20 minutes before we get into the heart of the session.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you counted down, I think, as well. And so
Yeah,
then
a
if
lot
you're
of
just
counting
kind of-
backwards.
right.
Somehow that works with the mind. It just follows it.
Yeah.
Even if you're thinking this is boring, you're going into an altered state.
There's
just
something
enough.
about
Yeah.
the counting backwards that, yeah.
For most people, yeah.
Yeah. And I studied hypnosis in college, so I had an idea, and I've hypnotized as well. So I had an idea of what it was, and I knew to just let myself listen to the voice, not the voice inside my head, but your voice.
Yeah.
The voice inside your head is, I think, what keeps you kind of out. So yeah, so it was going all well
Okay.
until you said, which was so well. First of all, when you brought it down to when I was 2, I think you said, "What can you see?"
An early childhood memory.
Early
Yeah.
childhood memory, and I don't have many, but I had this, and I always see it as me watching a movie. I don't see it as me in it. Is that how
Right.
people see it?
They do both. I call it first person, third person, and ideally the person is in it as first person, but personally, when I've done past life, I'm usually third person. I see it, but I know that's me. So or you have kind of a split awareness, sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like you're watching it, but you're also feeling it. So it depends.
It was like that. Like I was watching it, but I knew it was me and I could feel it too.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in it. So what would make the difference, just out of curiosity?
Well, sometimes before I work with someone, before we go into the actual hypnosis, I might have them do an exercise where they imagine looking in the mirror at home and seeing their face. And then I'll say, are you seeing yourself, or are you looking through your eyes at the image in the mirror?
Oh.
And a lot more people than you might imagine see themselves looking in the mirror. Like I think, well, I'd look in the mirror and see me. But and then I give them the opportunity to shift and say, okay, if they're looking out of their eyes, I'll say, okay, step back and be an observer of yourself. And they'll tell me, they're like 45 degrees and a little bit higher. I saw you, and it's very interesting. Or if they're outside, I'll have them go inside and see how that feels different. This can be really handy to know that you can change, because if we're in a past life situation, and let's say that something rather dire is about to happen, you can move into the third person and watch it rather than have to be in it.
Right. I think.
But if you're feeling kind of neutral and you aren't really getting into the emotions of the scene, then I'll invite them to step into the body and look out through your eyes and to be more in the body. So it's just a matter of allowing our consciousness to shift perspective.
yeah.
It's easier than people think. You can do it just at home, imagining, moving your mind, like focus on your foot, and your consciousness goes there.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. It's and it's so interesting because when you say that, of course, I can focus on my foot and feel that it's my foot.
Yeah.
When I was trying to do the shift as you were talking between, I could see myself looking at me in the mirror, from that third person. And when I
Yeah.
try to be the person looking in the mirror, that's a little difficult.
Yeah, and I think people are just naturally like right-handed, left-handed. They're first person or third person types,
okay.
and so I don't think there's anything right or wrong. But it's interesting to shift and see how that feels different, or is it hard for you? That's an interesting piece of information. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. How is it for you? Can you
I
do first person or third
I
person?
can do either one.
yeah.
Really? Wow. And do you feel it different? Does it feel different?
It does. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes I like, as the third person, I like to observe. So I do
Yeah.
that because when I work with people, I will often say, you're a soul having a physical experience. And as soon as you realize you're
Yeah.
a soul looking out of your eyes, it puts a different perspective on it too.
Yeah.
And for some people, being in the body, I'd say for most people, being in the body is the more emotionally experiential experience, but not everybody. So I just say, let's see how it works for you. And yeah.
I think that openness and just, whatever happens,
Yeah.
it's really helpful too,
Yeah.
So you put me down, and then what I saw was me in a crib by
All right,
myself.
Yes.
And you said, I think you said, what's the feeling, right?
I may have asked you, what are your thoughts and feelings?
Yeah. And I said numb. I felt numb. So there was like nobody there. I was there by myself, and I was just kind of standing, and I was almost like it felt like almost like a void, like just there, you know. And then you said, what was it that you said? What was the one after that? So there was nothing else, and then all of a sudden the image went away, I remember. And you asked me more about it, and I said, I don't know, the image is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we did another childhood memory or if we went right to the in utero part.
We
where
went right to
yeah,
the in utero.
which is
Yeah.
fascinating. Most people haven't ever tried to access that before. So I love that when we get to find out what you were aware of as a soul.
I know, which
Yeah.
was so interesting to me. Because you said, okay, how did you phrase it? You're in utero?
Yeah, it's a few days before your birth. We're not going through the birth, but you'll be aware of what you were aware of as a soul right before you were coming into your life as Shirley.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then that's when I said, I'm numb. And I could see, and again, I was seeing me in her, in utero. And I wasn't moving. It was like I was numb, like I couldn't move. I was just still, kind of just like waiting for it to happen. And then I don't know if it's a question you asked. What was my mom
Well,
thinking?
I have found that there is quite a lot of when you're a baby in utero and your mother is having feelings and emotions, you're being bathed in all that chemistry. And so it isn't unusual that people have taken on their mother's anxiety, fear, sadness, or numbness in this case, and it isn't even theirs. And then it stays with them because they came in with that imprint.
Yeah.
So I find this is a really potent place to do a little bit of alchemical healing where we send mom's feelings back to her with love. And I can ask people, it's so interesting. I don't remember if I did this. It was like, how much of that numbness, what percentage of that numbness belongs to you and how much belongs to your mother?
Yeah.
And people say, oh, it's about 75% her and 25% me. Or they'll say, it's all her. It never was mine. And so a lifelong problem with anxiety can just evaporate because
Yeah.
we give it back to mom and give the baby protection so that child doesn't have to carry that emotional imprint. So even though we're doing it backwards in time, it's way back then, there's this kind of non-local healing that happens in the present.
Right.
So I'm curious, have you been feeling benefits about not feeling numb about things where you might have felt numb before? Like where you'd want to feel more connected to what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've felt a lot more
Great.
connected just in general, you know,
Great,
because
yeah.
it was a numbness because of how anxious she was. So like it was more like I
A
couldn't
self-protective.
move. Well, I didn't want to make too much
Yeah.
Trouble for
too much
her,
trouble,
or-
too much, because you asked me what she was thinking. And again, this I think about it either way, but then I think, who gives a shit? I mean, it's my way. Like when with mediums and stuff like that, I know that I was supposed to be a boy. I know that I was unplanned. They already had a boy's name picked out. And so what came out for me was that she was really anxious and she was hoping that I was a boy so my dad would not be so upset
Yeah.
about it. So that could be because I knew that.
Right. It's kind of blended because people usually have had stories or heard stories from about their birth or what their
Right.
parents were going through. But sometimes it's really kind of a revelation to find out if they had a very troubled relationship with their mother, for example, that when she was just really scared and young. They'll often say she's so young, or they realize she really loves the baby. And they've never thought their mother loved them before, but they can feel that she actually had loving feelings toward the baby she was carrying, and that baby was them. So it can be a really healing experience, and it's always interesting. So,
Yeah. Well, what was interesting is, whether that came up because I knew it or not, it didn't matter because when you asked me why I was numb, and I said because, or what my mother was thinking or something like that, and I said, she's really anxious and she's hoping. And so when you said give it back to her, all of a sudden I saw myself starting to move inside
Yeah.
the
Oh,
womb.
wow.
And all of a sudden you said, what are you feeling? And I said, excitement.
right.
And
it
I was
really shifted. We
excited.
I
Yeah.
brought in like a metaphor of the sun kind of thawing out the numbness, and now she was excited about being born and getting this life going, and everything changed. It
Yeah,
was
and
really
excited
great.
about the journey, which that's never,
Right. We got
Right.
close. That's what your soul was really feeling all
Yeah.
that time before that you took on that imprint.
So then what would happen is her mother's fear and anxiety caused Shirley to become numb,
Yeah.
which would have prevented her from feeling life then.
Exactly. So when
excited
that
about
2-year-old
life.
baby was standing
Wow.
in the
Yeah.
crib, she could, I mean,
surely.
yeah, she was a little bit displaced from her own feelings. So, yeah.
So I think I was kind of like just not wanting to make a lot of waves because it wasn't supposed to.
So you would have
happen.
made decisions your whole life based on that then.
You could have.
You could have
Well,
easily.
I have. I mean, I'll never forget. When I was what do they call it, defending your dissertation in my PhD program, where one of the professors said, we didn't use her to her ability. Like we let her stay in the background. And I've always said I want to be in the background looking in. I don't want to be part of it, but I love being in the, on the sidelines looking in. Because I want to see what's going on, but I don't necessarily. And he actually said that. This professor, who I thought didn't even notice me, had said that. So I've always kind of don't make a lot of waves, kind of stay out of it, And so really, even doing this kind of stuff is really out of my.
Well, remember,
comfort
you told me
zone.
you'd rather be behind the camera than in front of it, but that might
Right.
change a little bit now.
Right,
So
right.
We'll see.
So who knows? But I've felt kind of this more. I would say more grounded, like it's okay that I'm here. I'm supposed to be here, and
Like
it's
more
okay
in
that
your
I'm
body?
here. More in my that's it. That's it. More in my body
Yeah.
is what I've been feeling, and more okay to be wherever I'm at.
Which is interesting because you are really attracted to the somatic experience and stuff, which is all
Yes.
about being in your body. And so
Yeah.
how you said that was a life-changing experience for you. So it keeps coming back to that.
It was. So it keeps coming back to that. It was kind of everything kind of, and we were talking about on a previous show about how we eventually come to wherever we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of,
It was your journey.
that was my journey of, learning somatic experiencing.
Sure.
Just
Coming
kind of
in
fell
numb.
on my lap.
So you chose a mother that was going to be anxious, that's going to create numbness for you. And it could have gone like that. And you've learned an awful lot about it, which you would not have gone down that road if you had been born with a healthy mother with no anxiety.
Yeah, who
It
said,
would have been very
welcome
different.
to the world,
Yeah.
and I would have felt so
would've-
happy to be
exactly.
here. Right, yeah. That's true, that's true. So it really, and again, I view it like anything else. Whether it's true or it's not, it doesn't matter because it makes sense to me, and it's allowing me to kind of move forward to, I guess, eventually what I came here to do. So who cares?
And the thing I think that's healing about it is, it's not me telling the person, oh, you chose this family, you created this.
Right.
When I'm doing this work, they're telling me, and they're having the aha moment. Oh, I handed them the script. I chose this family for a reason, and they did their job beautifully. So I got out of there.
Right, exactly.
And
Because they're
and-
so good.
And they were perfect models of how not to be.
Yeah.
yeah,
true.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And for me, it's like, what would you rather have, the story that you're the victim or you're the one who created this, and it's for your own benefit? Then you can bless that whole situation and move on unencumbered. And instead of fighting all the battles of the past, now you finally arrived. You're here.
I'm here. I'm
And
born,
you're
huh?
not numb.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so true because I did feel that shift. I mean, and it was an image that just completely was there when you said, okay, when you give it back to her, now what you're noticing, and all of a sudden I did notice, it was almost like the fetus was infused with life because it
Yeah.
started to move.
Yeah.
I saw
Wow.
myself moving all over the place. It was really
Yeah,
interesting.
It was.
Yeah.
What an experience for you.
I know. It
Yeah,
was
I
really
think that was
cool.
really worth the price of admission.
Completely.
because
It really
most of the
was.
rest of it, we had a conversation with your guide. We really didn't get into a past life so much. It said
We
next,
didn't get
we
into a
got
past
a
life.
next time.
And it was almost like, and I don't know again if it was me doing it or if it was, this is what it was supposed to be, because that was so life changing. And the thing with the guide, it's almost like I could feel something, top right, and it was like a light, so I didn't see anybody's face.
Right.
It felt male, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then every time that we would ask him a question, the words would like appear in my head, so it wasn't like I could hear something. So
Right.
that felt a little disappointing in that, like, I either wasn't doing it right or
No, you're doing it absolutely right.
Right,
That's
because
telepathic. That's how it
Kelly's
works.
Does this all the time,
This
right?
is what I
This-
do all the time.
Everyone imagines
So you
they're
don't
not
hear
I
it.
know, it's so funny, Shirley.
You
And
don't
also,
hear
a
it.
guide is only going to give you exactly what you're supposed to have for your growth at that exact moment. You did it absolutely correctly. Bravo to your male guide. He did a good job with you.
Well, so then you
gotta shut that left
what's
brain
his
down."
name? You said,
Oh yeah, does he want to share a name with
Does
you?
he want to share a
Often
name?
they do.
Okay, and the only thing I got was Bill, and then I saw him laughing, like he was being a jokester.
That
like his name
happens.
really
They
isn't
do
Bill.
have.
Yes,
Well, I told you,
they
you know,
do.
Don's is Nathan. I mean, you know, they come up with all kinds of names. Who cares?
Okay, great. Yeah, Bill.
And then
Bill,
you-
Bill my
yeah.
guide.
And then you know the question is like, why would you make that up? Like it's hard to pull a joke on yourself.
Right,
Like we can't
exactly.
tickle ourselves. We can't,
Right.
So if your guide says something that you think you're making up and it makes you laugh, I don't know. The other thing too for validating for me is that. I had already sensed your guide was male. I could feel its presence on your side. I'll ask people, they say, I don't see anything. I'm not feeling anything. I don't know if my guide's here. But I'm like, there's this giant green being right in front of you, that I can see in my inner little monitor. So I'll ask and say, well, does it sound like you'd rather say male or female? Is it a he or a she? We know that guides don't really have gender the way we would think, but we just feel more comfortable saying he or she.
Right.
So instead of they or, we just kind of identify. And you say, I felt it was more masculine balanced. And you said he. And I said, okay, check, and like, is there a color? And that helps me know that I'm on track with what the person is seeing and can sometimes help them kind of focus in on who their guide is and but I have found that very often they are color and energy more than it's more of a presence than a kind of Santa Claus figure, or although sometimes they do show up, and that'd be funny.
Right.
They can be funny that way. There have been quite a few guides that arrive, like Linda the Good and The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that's so
as
funny.
a kind of joke,
That's so
Yeah.
funny.
I've not had that one, but
But yeah, it felt more like it was a light, like it was a golden light, and it was more of a presence I didn't see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also speak in simple terms. If I start getting a big, long, convoluted lecture, then I know I'm in touch with the person's inner spiritual dictator. They speak
Inner spiritual
simply,
dictator, that's
and
funny.
we got you had a lot of validation, and I think this is also for the overachievers. They go, well, my guide said I'm doing fine, like I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. That's boring,
Yeah.
But it's actually great news,
Yeah.
because. You don't maybe feel that way, but your guide's saying, keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right track. And that's the kind of...
because they actually know the contract, they know what you're here
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
There wasn't like yeah.
But that's a big thing.
But yeah, it was, and then at the end it was just kind of done.
Yeah.
It was, and I could tell it was just kind of.
It's like the connection. It's, the chat is over. And then, but we did say, I think there was something about an Egyptian past life. I can't remember how.
Oh, there
Because I
was.
was actually picking up Egyptian things. I don't know if I said anything,
Yeah.
but it's that your guide said next time.
Exactly. You picked
Yeah.
up on something like that, and so he said something like next time or not now or something. But I've always, ever since I was a kid, I would fascinated with Egypt and always watching the National Geographics, or Mutual of Omaha's,
Yeah.
back then, and I would always see that. So I think that there's something, but it was just, and then as I hear the recording, I'm talking in a really low voice.
That's why
and
I wear the
was
earphones.
Really slow, and I'm talking really slow. I mean, it amazed me to hear myself talking like that, but I knew that I was talking like that, and because I had made the commitment to just go with it, I didn't question it or didn't think, oh my God, this is weird. I just went with it. But while I was under, I heard myself talking slower and in a lower voice.
And some people don't, but they're still surprised because when they did you have a time? Did the time seem like it went faster too? Many people feel that time distortion.
No.
They may have had a session that was an hour and a half or 2 hours, and they think it's 20 minutes, and they're shocked at what time it is, or it's gotten dark outside or something. And now they'll go, oh, I guess maybe something did happen, But we were talking earlier, and you were saying you didn't really feel as different as you thought you might, and that's something that I really would like to. Maybe you talk about that, because people have these myths and these ideas that hypnosis is going to be a dramatically different state of mind, where they feel like they're under the influence of something, or that they'll lose control. You never felt out of control, did you?
No, not
so
at
it
all.
felt safe, and
No, my left brain, dictator that you're talking about
Yeah.
was there. I had just made, I've heard so much about this, and I studied it myself, and I've done it myself,
Yeah.
and then with Kelly, that I gave myself not really permission. I just said conscious choice. Just focus on her words, because that's how you can get hyper focused and what we
Right.
call hypnosis. And so I just made that. But yeah, I could have pulled out any time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I thought was fascinating is actually, and part of the reason why I wanted you to come back is to talk about this one thing that we talked about before.
Okay,
We did
before
the
you went,
induction.
we did the hypnosis.
Yeah, I
right.
wanted to share with everyone because I did say I was going
Yeah.
to try it. I mean, again,
Yeah.
I'll try anything when it comes to this just to see how
Yeah.
it was. And it was life altering. And, when you talk about the change, it's just, it's very similar to like the change in therapy. You don't just wake up one day and feel completely different. You notice it in how different
You look back and go, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
that way anymore.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
I would have said this, or I would have done that. And even as you're asking me, because I hadn't really sat and thought about, do I feel different? But since I've seen you, when I've been invited to places, I just go and I have fun. And usually my running thing was, well, they don't really want me here. Are you overstaying your welcome?
Oh.
Do you not,
That's
do they really
big.
want you here? In fact, when this was years ago, before years of therapy, people would invite me to parties and I would not go because I knew they didn't really want me there. A guy would ask me out and I would say no because I knew he really didn't want to go out with me. I mean, how retarded
Not
is
new,
that?
you thought.
I thought,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
and I didn't mean to use the word retarded.
I know what you mean.
How silly is that? It's
Yeah.
almost like I'm making a decision for you because you
Right.
don't know better.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
and I lost the opportunity to go out with this really hot guy in college who looked like the brunette version of David Lee Roth. And we did go out once. He took me to a David Lee Roth concert. Then he asked me out again, and I thought, no, he doesn't really like me. So I said no. How silly is
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people have those scripts in their mind, and they think, and this is why I feel like self-love is so important. Because if you don't love yourself, then when someone loves you, you'll doubt it and keep undermining it and pick fights with them to
Well-
prove. Like if you really knew who I was, you wouldn't really love me.
Right.
But so if you can look in the mirror and feel love and affection toward yourself, I mean, you can say I love you, but it's really more about how you feel. when
Yeah.
is that a friendly face that
Right,
you know?
right.
Then when someone loves and appreciates you, you can resonate with that and actually reciprocate from a place of wholeness instead of trying to fill yourself up with other people's love. you know?
Right, right.
That you're going to shoot down anyway, right?
Well, exactly. But that's just it. And it makes
Yeah.
all the sense in the world now that I have this, this experience with you, that if I knew at that soul level, that I wasn't planned and I was going to be the total wrong sex and I wasn't supposed to be here, then of course that would lead me to believe that I don't belong and I'm not. And so the idea then isn't that weird that I would think you're inviting me to a party. No, you really
But
don't
you really
want
don't
me to
want
be there.
me. You'd
Me to
rather
be
have
there.
somebody else, and I'm the second or whatever.
It's
Like
that
I'm
script you were
Yeah.
talking about
Or I-
rerunning.
Right. I wouldn't even think it further than they're inviting me, but they really don't want me. There's someone to say no. And the most interesting thing is in our profession too is that then that turns into the self-fulfilling prophecy because I distinctly remember this one gal who stopped inviting me because I would never go.
So she thought you didn't like her.
Exactly. Or I
Isn't
just
that
wasn't
funny?
interested in going to parties or anything.
Yeah.
Her husband made a mention one time, I remember years ago. And so then that's the self-fulfilling prophecy that just kind of, but you don't realize how your own behavior is causing that. But to me, it makes sense that I would think that given this, what I experienced with you in the birthing, and of course knowing that I wasn't. But that's what you heal in therapy. I mean, I think that's why therapy is so valuable. And then having experiences like,
Well, so this would be a good thing for a client or a patient to do then, maybe to have this experience.
I think so. I think everything helps heal.
Yeah.
In sessions that I've had with psychics or mediums, or when you and I talk and you tell me some bits and pieces that come up, or the session with you, I think every little bit helps.
Well, with the skills you have, since you do hypnosis, you could take your patients to that in utero place and check and see if there's something that needs to be released. It doesn't have to be the whole life between lives experience, but that's a really potent place.
I didn't even think about that,
yeah.
but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, we go to earliest incident, like we do talk about what happened in early childhood, but people don't consider what might have been. I mean, people are sometimes aware of what's being said in the room about them. They'll hear the argument their parents are having.
Yeah.
My mother had a case a long time ago when she did a woman was trying to find her birth parents, and she went back to the delivery room and she heard them talking about, it was like this terrible blizzard was happening, and so she knew what month and year she was born, and she went back through all the weather and she found the city, like it was St. Louis or something, where there was this big blizzard. And so she narrowed it down, and then she knew which hospitals to check, and she used that piece of information from a conversation she heard being born in the delivery room, and that was the beginning of how she found her birth parents.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing.
It is amazing, and it doesn't happen that easily all the time, but
Yeah.
it can be. But we think of the babies as absolutely, like that they aren't aware of anything.
They're
But the
aware.
thing is, it's the soul that's aware. The soul is still fusing with the body. It isn't actually limited by the baby's sensory system yet.
Right,
So it's sort of like when people go out of body during surgery, that baby, the soul,
And
is aware.
for about a year, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and in the language of somatic experiencing,
Yeah.
the body, is aware of what's happening. If the baby gets separated, if the newborn gets separated from the mother, because the
Right.
newborn either has, it has to be in an incubator or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you see this little kid that's very angry. You always ask about the birth, because there's a body knowing of what happened. You guys are saying from a soul level.
Yeah.
And I happen to believe that because I believe in that as well. But even from a body place,
Yeah.
they found that babies do know, and they've done research where a 2-week-old can recognize the voice, his mother's voice.
Oh, yeah.
So there is research to also show that there is a knowing with newborns.
And they're doing more in utero studies where they can see, like when the father's talking, the baby gets animated in utero. They recognize the father's voice,
Right,
and they
exactly.
or they'll respond to music or things like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more to be discovered here.
Oh,
But,
yeah. Most definitely.
I just find it so fascinating, though, that because of your interest in somatics, and then we go back into in utero, which is you sitting in a chair, going back in your mind, and then your body felt different as the baby then, and then that comes back and helps you and informs you now in your body now. It's just so magical. I can't explain how it
really is.
happens, but it's real. This is the mind-body connection, and it's most interesting.
Mind, body, soul.
Yeah, mind, body,
connection.
soul. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, no, that is so true because
Yeah.
it does. As I'm thinking about it now, I've been to many places in the last
I got chills on that.
Yeah.
mind, body, soul. Yeah.
in the last couple of weeks, and that idea of am I, and it's not nearly. I mean, it used to be as strong as 100%. Now it's maybe 2%, maybe. That idea of I'm overstaying my welcome, or they really don't want me here, didn't even show up.
Wow.
As I'm thinking about it now.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how it is with therapy. Where
Yeah.
someone will say, people who, heal that old wound of finding the same guy. I've heard it so many times. A year ago, I would have never been attracted to this person, and this person is like their ideal guy,
Right.
who is really kind and nice and stuff. Or something happened, and I, 6 weeks ago, I would have reacted this different way, and I'm not reacting that way now. So that's kind of how it is in therapy, and kind of how it is.
Yeah,
the
I mean,
session.
there's sort of similar thing that happens. There's I forget the fellow's name who wrote it, but the book is called Radical Forgiveness, and he devoted 12 years of his life going around the world, and he did forgiveness workshops with Palestinians and Israelis and families or communities that had and also just with normal everyday people who we all have our traumas. And he found that when people tried to sit there and forgive, they couldn't. But if they just had willingness to forgive, if they could allow the willingness, I'm willing to forgive, and ask for their soul, God, whatever, to help them.
Yeah.
And they'd look up like a couple weeks later and realize, oh, I've let it go.
His name is Colin Tipping.
Thank you, Colin Tipping, fantastic fellow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? Thank you for that, John.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, they've done studies now that I actually posted on Facebook, I think on our both sites now, is about gratitude and how that can
Yes.
shift the perspective.
It actually changes the structure of your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I have one of my clients who just took it upon himself to do and just writes 3 things that he's grateful for at the end of night. And it could be something very small. Someone smiled at me,
Right.
you know, and not always the same thing every night. And in 1 week noticed a shift. It's very real, and now there's research to back it up.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it shifts something in your brain, like you said. Yeah. So talking about that kind of as a segue into what's called state-specific learning.
Right.
Which is something
what
that we
is
talked
that?
about.
State-specific
It's
learning.
when you learn something under a specific state. So, for example, if you, what could be an example? People who are studying when they're either listening to music or when they're on, have smoked pot, so you're learning under,
Under that influence?
Under that influence or in a
Okay.
specific state. Then you have to take the test under the same state.
Right.
So you shouldn't, I think you
Whoa.
mentioned you shouldn't be, if you're drinking coffee while you're studying, you have to be able to drink coffee while you're
Right.
taking the
If
test.
you need to know what your circumstances when
Yeah.
you take the exam and to create those as much as possible while you're studying. So, I think an easy thing is I used to, when I was in college, I might read while I was in bed, lying down, reclining in my pajamas. That's not the best way to study because you're not going to take your test that way. You're going to be sitting up at a, usually at a
Right.
desk. And so the more you mimic that, and also, the mood you're in, the state of mind. So I shared with Shirley that I had read some research many years ago, and I've actually looked it up again, and it's there. They did EEGs of children, normal children. Most of the information you find is about problems, but somebody
Right.
studied what's the normal EEG because it's different from adults.
And
Yes.
explain what an EEG
Yeah, an
is.
EEG is an electroencephalogram. It measures the brain waves, the electrical activity of your brain.
in your brain. Right.
And these have different waves that are more or less correlated with different states of consciousness. So a lot of people have heard of alpha, which is a light, relaxed state you're in right before you go to sleep or just when you're waking up. And it's basically the slower the brain waves, and they're measured in hertz, they're really kind of like sound waves, the more relaxed your mind and body are. And as it speeds up, we get into beta, which is when you're balancing your checkbook or solving a puzzle or figuring out your directions on how you're going to go somewhere. That beta state is what we consider like the conscious, aware brain.
Okay.
And so
What's like theta? I've heard that. as a
theta
wave too.
is actually slower than alpha. So delta is the slowest. There are 4 main ones. There are other waves, and we usually have a combination. It's like what's the predominant wave in your brain at any given moment. So delta is really, really deep sleep.
Okay.
And they believe that people don't even have imagery at that point. Theta is a little faster than that, and that's where we may be dreaming in theta.
Okay.
It's where a lot of psychics are able to
Yeah,
go.
I had an EEG, and I was told
Yes.
that my brain was in theta.
A lot of theta.
Yeah.
Really?
right?
So like
It's like
your,
a monk brain.
so your resting brain is in theta. Huh. That's
And these are
interesting.
just names that were given when they've only been measuring the electrical activity of the brain for about 100 years, maybe 90 years. So they didn't even know brains were electrical. They saw it in dogs, and then they thought, let's hook this up to people, and found out that not only is it electrical, but it has very specific kinds of waves correlated to tasks that you're doing or states of sleep. So they're still learning about this. And alpha is kind of like half awake, half asleep. Alpha is why when I tell people to listen to a hypnosis recording at home as they're going to sleep, for about a half an hour you're in alpha, so your conscious mind is asleep, but your subconscious mind is still listening.
Okay.
And so information can go in, and you can pick up things in the room. So it's not the best thing to fall asleep watching TV, considering what's on most TVs.
Right,
So,
yeah.
it's something you might want to protect a little bit.
yeah.
And you might think a child in the room is asleep and they're not paying attention, but they may be getting more than you realize. And we have experiences where people have been in surgery and been under general anesthesia, and they're able to recall things that happened.
Right,
So
right.
it's important what's said in an operating room or around a sleeping person.
Definitely.
So then beta is when you're really, kind of wide awake. And what we found was that the babies from infants to young children 4 or 5, they spend a lot of time with delta being even when they're awake. There's a lot more delta waves and theta waves. And then as they get older, alpha becomes more predominant. And then as they get into teen years, they have more and more beta, which is why they can do things like algebra. It's not that little kids can't, but it's a little easier for teenagers. And this is individual. There's no moment where this happens. But
Right.
So I was thinking as a hypnotherapist why it is that hypnosis works so well to help people change habits. Because if you try to do something from your conscious mind, from beta, it's willpower, and it's really frustrating and hard. But because why? Because the subconscious is where our patterns are stored,
Right.
where they were laid down. And and it isn't just habits, it's the scripts that you have, that you heard, that your parents said to you when you were 3, and it went in deep. Because why? Because you were in theta, which is a trance state, a waking trance. So this is my theory, that the reason that hypnosis works is that we take the person back into alpha or theta, and we speak directly to the subconscious and give it a new way of being, and allow it, because most of these things were formed when we were kids, and that's why we're stuck in these no longer appropriate behavior patterns that worked when we were maybe saved us from getting punished or something.
Right.
But now you need to give a talk in front of your boss, and you're terrified because something happened to you in the 2nd grade.
Right.
And so we take the person back into that state and teach the subconscious a new way of being. And it's related to the state-specific learning and memory, because when we try to change it from a different state, it's really hard.
Right. So you're trying
Yeah.
to change something that was, let's say, laid down or planted
Right.
in theta from a beta perspective.
Exactly.
So it's like that talk therapy kind of thing. You're trying to get someone, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't help or it doesn't, doesn't work. But it sounds like that if we can get them, if we can get the healing at the level that it was, that the damage was
Right.
done, for lack of a better way to say it, then we can see change a little bit quicker, maybe.
Which is exactly what happened when you had your experience in the in utero space, because I'm sure if infants are in delta or theta, you were in that when you were in utero. And so we went back. You were very relaxed when we did that work.
Yeah.
And we were able to kind of reprogram your consciousness to release that numbness.
At that, right, in that state.
And those ideas that I'm not wanted. That just kind of came along for the ride. We got a kind of gestalt thing that happened there, which is great.
Yeah, which
So,
is
yeah.
true. And didn't I say that I knew, they joked that I was supposed to be Ricardo and that I was not planned and all that stuff. They joked about that, but that didn't switch anything. But it was
Yeah.
only when
You kind of go back to that.
we go in and I was in that state to hear it or to kind of
Reset it.
reset it or something,
Yeah.
or however we want to say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. And with all the research out there about state-specific learning, it makes so much sense.
Well, I kind of joke because we know that it works. That hypnotherapy works. We know that it works. We didn't always know how it worked. I
Yeah.
mean, like what the mechanics are, and it's kind of fun to see science catching up with us. So we can
Right.
say, okay, you guys are figuring out how we do what we do. Thanks for giving us the footnotes.
Right, exactly. The validation that
Yeah.
apparently, us left brains out there needed, but the right
Right.
brains knew all along that, it worked
Right.
and didn't care why it worked.
Well, it's hard to get money to study these things,
Yeah.
but they have recently, and they found that, when people who are under hypnosis and told that they can't see color, for example, and the brainwaves change to black and white image. I mean, they can measure this.
Oh, wow.
And same thing with pain reduction. The brain acts the same way as if it had taken a painkiller.
My goodness.
And so they're actually seeing, because before they would think, oh, it's just you making it up or just your imagination, which that'd be a whole other book about the power of the imagination. It's not to be disparaged. It's you want your imagination to work for you. The placebo effect is a really, think about that.
Yeah.
That people are being healed with sugar pills because their mind believes, and even when they tell you it's a placebo, it still works. Did you know that?
Right.
There is still a placebo effect even when people know they're taking a placebo.
Yeah.
There's just something
fascinating.
yeah, it is. So why fight it? Let's use it in a way that helps.
It's so funny because, they kind of say it's a placebo effect to minimize the outcome. Who cares?
Right.
It just kind of shows the power of our minds that we're able to do that. And if it is a placebo effect, it doesn't matter.
Right.
if there's pain relief, then it doesn't matter if it's a placebo effect.
Yes, but there's something else called a nocebo, where
What is that?
That means that somebody tells you something's going to harm you. And I think in particular doctors need to be aware of that, because
Yeah.
they talk about all the worst things that something could be to cover themselves legally.
Right.
But that's actually when people are in a exam room with someone in a white coat and that person comes in and says something scary, that can also help or hurt the person. You can
Right.
you can fulfill that prophecy too.
Well, and it would make sense
Yeah.
because it's not always going to be for your betterment.
Right.
So the nocebo effect is when someone tells you something bad's going to happen, and that's what you start to feel,
Right.
or that
Oh my
you're going to
God.
have pain.
Well,
or-
I know that people go to mediums, and some people, and psychics, some people say, really negative things,
The
and
doom
that
and
throws them.
gloom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I
whoa.
really
Oh,
yeah.
that's a horrible.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to undo some of those. I call them
bet.
bad trances.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, a bad trance is I was supposed to be a boy. It's a thought that goes in and stays with you. The old-fashioned word for it is a curse. And we start living it out. And so again, take the person into the state where they learned that nonsense and teach them something new. And that's a real help for people.
Yeah.
So, and yes, if it's like the doctor in the white coat or the psychic who knows all. And I had a woman who was like a brand new baby intuitive, and she came up to me and said something about my health. I actually knew about it, but I said, you really need to ask someone first before you
There are
deliver.
rules.
I hadn't asked her for any information. She just wanted to tell me. And and it's still, even though I kind of was aware of it and I'm very good at managing my own energy, it was a
Yeah.
little bit of a hit. It was a nocebo effect.
Yeah.
And, I worried about myself a little bit more than I should have for a few days, and I had to shake it off. But, she kind of, she was actually open to listening to me. I said,
Yeah.
if you have this ability, you need to be really cautious about telling people and ask them, or let them at least, pay you and have a session. And then even then ask your guide, is it important for them to know this? Is this helpful for someone to know?
The ethics of being a psychic.
Yeah.
That
that's
is-
the
And
truth.
you don't have to be a psychic. It's like when you walk in, you look really tired. Is something wrong with
yeah.
you?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
don't say that to people.
I was just going to say,
stuff.
well, particularly,
Yeah.
parents and what they tell their kids. I mean,
Yes.
our words are so important.
Right.
And it's, it creates energy, and it also creates, if you look at, from a body standpoint in the brain, our brains are very powerful, and they might start to do something. I mean, as we're talking about it now, I'm kind of getting this, aha moment. I guess it's no coincidence that I had to have a hysterectomy, and I got rid of all my girl parts, I mean,
Oh, you just
Yeah.
had that just
Yeah.
now, that aha moment?
yeah.
Wow.
Because
Oh
I'm
my
supposed to be a
gosh.
boy, and so I developed endometriosis, which is not in my family at all.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a
So-
good
That's
example
huge.
of disease, or even though it's not really a
Yeah.
disease,
The
but
Brain,
maybe it is.
yeah. I mean, the brain can do
Yeah.
powerful things,
Yeah.
and it is like that. Why is it that when we imagine something, which is a tool we use a lot in somatic experiencing, you imagine something wonderful, like say, I always say like your dog or your kid or something, immediate smiles, and you see the relief,
Right.
because imagining is the same thing as the real thing, because the primitive part of the brain doesn't know
Right.
the difference between real or imagined. So we can
Yeah.
shift our moods, we can shift our perspectives by just imagining different things.
Right. And, I don't want people to come away from this feeling afraid of their thoughts, but it's also important not to believe every thought you have. And, to say, well, do I really want to give my energy to that thought? Becoming aware of what's in your head is the first step. And then, how can you change it to a positive counterstatement? Like,
Well,
I love
absolutely.
being a woman might be a good one for you.
Right, exactly. Well, exactly. Or, I belong in whatever body
Yeah.
I'm in this
Affirmations
time,
or
and
something.
affirmations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I think they're so powerful and why they work, because, I think the key is to really be aware that whole ridiculous idea of, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me is a complete lie.
No,
and words
words
do
do.
hurt. So just be cognizant of the words that come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, don't get stuck on a thought.
Yeah.
You can always switch that around. Be curious as to where it came from, and know that you can switch it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. So enlightening.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Linda,
you for having me. It's
Thank
always
you.
a pleasure.
coming.
Wow.
Coming again. Why don't you thank you for the crowd? why don't you give us a little bit of our listeners your information? You have a website?
Yes, I do. It's www.lindagabriel.com. That's a very easy to remember. My name, Linda Gabriel, like the archangel. And I'm in Los Angeles, and I also do sessions through Skype. Not so much hypnosis over Skype, but I do coaching through Skype.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that. And do you have a Facebook page?
I do. I have Linda Gabriel, and I have one called Thought Medicine, which is where my main Facebook page is. And I have that's my blog, thoughtmedicine.com.
Thought Medicine, okay,
Yeah.
.com. And then on Facebook, they just put Thought Medicine, and that will take them to
Yes.
you. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much
Thanks.
for being here today.
And I really feel like you wanted me here.
I did. I
We
really
were so
did.
excited.
I
Yeah.
really did. Yeah. I wanted
I
to
believed you when you invited
And
me.
I have seen a difference in Shirley in the
Oh,
last
that's
couple of weeks
great.
since her session.
Oh, good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it was really amazing, and I did want to share on air.
Thank you.
Our
Thanks for-
session. 'cause
We
it
were all
really
in
was.
suspense. We weren't in any details.
I don't think
until
anybody thought
today's
this left brain was going to
episode.
do it.
Yeah.
But
There
I-
might be
she
more.
did my
There might be
word.
more to come. We'll see.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got really. It
Yeah.
was a great result, actually. I'm very.
Yeah,
happy
no,
with it.
I'd like to. It feels like I need to let more time pass, but I'd like to do it again. I really would.
So it's a process. So it
Yeah.
comes in time, right? You're just
Right.
absorbing the energy or absorbing the changes.
Yeah.
And acting
You
out.
kinda
And
have
as
to
Kelly
s-
said,
Yeah.
your guide will give you exactly what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Bill.
Bill.
Yeah.
Bill. Really, Bill? I mean, that is just so funny.
That's it, Bill.
So that's it. So yeah, it feels like I just kind of have have to be in this for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
And that
So-
happens with any energy healing too.
Sure.
Yeah, it takes time.
Integration.
And somatic healing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So, anyways, thank you for listening. We hope that you've enjoyed yourself and have a good afternoon.
Bye bye.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world.